My name is Margaret. Most folks just call me Maggie, though lately it feels like the world has forgotten my name altogether. I'm 74 years old, born and raised in Ohio, but for the last 40 years I've lived here in a small town outside of Houston, Texas. This was once a place where I knew everyone and everyone knew me. Now I feel invisible, like a shadow slipping between people who are too busy to notice. I wasn't always this way. I used to be strong, independent. I worked as a school secretary for nearly 30 years, raising 2 children with my husband, Robert. We had a modest life, never luxurious, but we had dignity. Robert passed away 9 years ago from a sudden heart attack, and since that day, the house has been too quiet, the nights too long, and the world too heavy. When Robert died, I thought I could manage. My son lives up north in Chicago, busy with his family and his career. My daughter, well, she's close by in miles, but far away in spirit. We talk once in a while, but I know she has her own burdens. I've learned not to expect much. So it's just me, this creaky house, and the fading photographs on the mantel. The problem began when my knees gave out last winter. It wasn't a dramatic fall or an accident, just years of wear catching up to me. I waked one morning and realized I couldn't stand without gripping the dresser for valance. And suddenly the errands I once did with ease, walking to the grocery store, climbing the porch steps, turned into mountains I couldn't climb. The doctor said arthritis, age, and time. He made it sound like a simple fact, like telling me the sky was blue. But to me, it felt like a sentence. What makes it worse is the money. Robert's pension helped for a while, and I get my Social Security, but it's barely enough. Groceries cost more every week. Electricity, too. I used to treat myself to fresh flowers once a month. Now I stand in the store staring at them, then shuffle away with only bread and canned soup in my cart. Pride is the strange thing. Too strong to let me ask for help, too weak to keep me from crying when no one's watching. One afternoon, the neighbor's teenage boy was mowing the lawn. He left half of it uncut near the fence line, probably rushing to get back to his phone or friends. I went to march out there and remind him that lawns deserve respect. But instead, I just watched from my window. That's the kind of woman I become. Someone who watches silently while the world does things half-heartedly. I hate it. But loneliness is the hardest. People assume old age means peace, but peace without company feels like punishment. Days blur together, marked only by the 6 p.m. news and the sound of the mail slot clattering shut. Sometimes I hold on to junk mail longer than I should, just with the illusion that someone remembered me. At night I leave the TV on so the silence doesn't swallow me whole. And yet I keep going. I wake up, I make my tea, I water this small potted plant Robert gave me on our last anniversary. It's half dead now, but I can't throw it away. I shuffle through the day, whispering prayers I'm not sure anyone hears. I remind myself that I survived tougher times, the depression years as a child, raising kids with barely 2 nickels to rub together, burying the love of my life. Still, nothing compares to the ache of this being left behind by time itself. There was this one particular morning that changed everything. It was cold for Texas, about 40 degrees, and I needed groceries. I put on my thick sweater, leaned on my cane, and made the slow walk to the corner store.
Halfway there, my knees buckled. I froze, gripping on lamppost like it was the only thing tethering me to this earth. People passed me by. Men in suits, women with shopping bags, kids with hookahs. Not one stopped. Not one asked, "Ma'am, are you all right?" I stood there trembling until I caught my breath, then limped the rest of the way, humiliated. That's when it hit me. I'm invisible. The world has no place for old women who walk slowly and speak softly. I could collapse right here on this sidewalk, and folks would step on me like I was trash blown in by the wind. I don't tell my children this. What would be the point? My son would feel guilty. My daughter would sigh and tell me to get help. But what help? I can't afford a caregiver. And besides, how do you ask for help without sounding like a burden? I was reached us down on my own feet, not beg for someone else to carry me. Still, I wonder, is this what the rest of my days will be? Waiting for time to finish me off while the world keeps racing ahead? Or is there something left? Something that I can still fight for, even if my knees are weak and my voice is small? I don't know the answer yet, but I do know one thing. I refuse to let myself disappear without telling my story.
After that morning when I nearly collapsed by the lamppost, something shifted inside me. Fear, yes, but also a strange, simmering anger. I came home trembling, set the groceries on the counter, and sat in my chair by the window. My knees ached, my pride ached even more. I wanted to cry, but instead, I clenched my fists. How dare the world look past me as though I were nothing? That night, I barely slept. Memories kept floating back of who I used to be. I saw myself as a younger woman, walking briskly to the school office, juggling paperwork and answering phones, calming anxious parents and stubborn teachers. I wasn't invisible then. People needed me. My children ran into my arms. Robert kissed me after long days. Neighbors waved from across the street. Somewhere along the years, I faded. But I was still here. And I thought, maybe it isn't too late to matter again. The next morning, I did something unusual. I opened the small box under my bed. It's an old cedar box Robert built, scratched on the lid, smelling faintly of his cologne. Inside, I keep letters, photos, and small trinkets from my life. I pulled out a photograph of myself at 32, standing in front of the school with a wide smile. My hair was dark then, my shoulders straight, my eyes alive. I stared at that woman for a long time. She was still me, buried under wrinkles and aches. She hadn't vanished. She was waiting to be remembered. I whispered to her, "Maggie, don't you dare give up now." But courage doesn't arrive all at once. The truth is, I was still terrified. The world outside seemed so fast, so merciless. I had grown used to hiding indoors, letting my silence protect me from disappointment. But something inside told me to push against that fear, even in the smallest ways. So I started by sitting on the front porch again. It might sound trivial, but to me, it was like climbing the mountain. For weeks, I had stayed behind closed curtains, afraid neighbors would pity me if they saw me struggling. That afternoon, though, I dragged the chair onto the porch, wrapped myself in a shawl, and just sat. The breeze was crisp. The sound of children playing down the street drifted toward me. A young mother pushing a stroller passed by. She glanced at me and smiled politely. It wasn't much, but to me, it was proof I was still visible. From then on, I made the porch my daily ritual.
At first, no one said much, but slowly, people began nodding as they walked past. One afternoon, the boy who mowed the lawn half-heartedly actually waved. Small acknowledgments, yes, but each one stitched a little strength back into my soul. Then came the church invitation. A lady named Carol, who lives 2 streets over, stopped one day while walking her dog. She asked how I was doing, and before I knew it, I had poured out a little of my truth. How lonely I'd been, how quiet the house had become. She touched my hand and said, "Why don't you come to church this Sunday, just to be with people?" At first, I shook my head. I hadn't been to church regularly since Robert's funeral. The thought of facing a crowd, walking with my king, hearing whispers of pity, it all felt unbearable. But that Saturday night, when I sat with nothing but the TV for company, I thought about her invitation. What harm would it do? So the next morning, I dressed carefully. Blue skirt, white blouse, the pearl necklace Robert had given me on our 40th anniversary. My knees wobbled, but my spirit felt oddly steady. When I arrived at the church, I almost turned back. The parking lot was crowded, families bustling, children laughing. I felt small, out of place. But then Carol spotted me, waved, and hurried over. She walked me inside, sat beside me, and whispered during the hymns when I fumbled with the book. For the first time in months, I didn't feel entirely alone. After service, a few people introduced themselves. Nothing grand, just handshakes and nice to meet yous. But I felt noticed, alive, human again. I went home with a sense of warmth that had nothing to do with the Texas sun. That one morning became a seed. I started pushing myself more. Twice a week, I forced myself to walk, even if just to the mailbox and back. I called my daughter instead of waiting for her call. The conversations were still short and sometimes awkward, but I told her about church, about Carol, about sitting on the porch. She didn't say much, but I sensed a softening in her voice, like she was relieved I was trying. Then one afternoon, something remarkable happened. I was sitting on the porch when a young girl from the neighborhood approached me. She couldn't have been more than 12. She said, "Excuse me, ma'am, do you know how to knit? My grandmother used to, but she passed away." Her question startled me. I hadn't touched my knitting needles in years. My hands aren't as nimble, but the memory's still there. Knitting sweaters for my baby, scarves for Robert. I said, "Yes, I do," I told her slowly. "I know how to knit." Her eyes lit up. "Could you teach me sometime?" I almost said no. Fear again, doubt again. But then I caught myself. This is what I had been longing for. Purpose. I said, "Yes, dear, come by tomorrow." The next day, she showed up with a ball of yarn and clumsy hands. I guided her fingers, showed her the rhythm, corrected her mistakes gently. We laughed when the yarn tangled. For an hour, I wasn't just an old woman on a porch. I was a teacher, a mentor, a friend. Word spread, and soon 2 other girls joined us. Then a mother asked if she could sit and learn too. Within weeks, my porch turned into a little circle of knitters, young and old. Fingers moving, storage flowing, laughter filled the air. And for the rest coming years, my house felt alive. I realized something then. My body may be frail, but my spirit still carries wisdom, patience, and love. These young ones weren't coming for perfect stitches. They were coming for connection, for the warmth of an elder's presence, something too rare in their fast-moving lives. Each evening after they left, I felt lighter. I slept deeper. The nightmares of being invisible began to fade. I still had pain in my knees. I still struggled with bills, but those problems no longer defined me. What defined me was the life returning to my porch, to my heart. One night while washing my teacup, I whispered aloud, "Robert, I think I'm finding my way again." I don't know, he heard me, but in that moment I felt his presence, as though he was proud of me. Still, doubts linger. Sometimes I wonder if this newfound strength will last. What if my health worsens? What if the young ones drift away? But then I remind myself today is enough. Today I am not invisible. Today I matter. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow will bring even more reasons to keep going.
I never imagined that a porch, a ball of yarn, and a few curious children could change my life so completely. Yet here I am, months later, waking each morning with anticipation instead of dread. The same house feels brighter now, though nothing in it has changed except me. My knees still ache. The bills still arrive in their stubborn envelopes, but I no longer stare at them with the same despair because I have found something I thought was lost forever: purpose. The knitting circle became more than just a pastime. At first, it was 2 or 3 children. Then their friends came, then their mothers. Soon, every Saturday afternoon, my porch filled with chatter, laughter, and clumsy attempts at scars. We named ourselves the Porch Stitchers. It was a silly name, but it made everyone smile. One evening, as we gathered, Carol, the lady who first invited me to church, joined us with her granddaughter. She brought cookies and someone else brought lemonade. We knitted, we laughed, and I told stories from my younger days. How I once stayed up all night knitting a sweater for my son before his school trip. How Robert teased me because the sleeves came out too long. The children listened wide-eyed, as though my past was a storybook. That night, after everyone left, I sat on the porch long after sunset, holding my knitting in my lap. I realized something profound. People weren't coming here just to learn stitches. They were coming to feel connected. And in giving them that, I was stitching myself back together, piece by fragile piece. But it wasn't only about them. I was changing too. I began to walk a little farther each day, not just to the mailbox, but down the block. Neighbors started recognizing me. They'd wave or call out, "How's the Dane Club, Maggie?" I'd wave back and proudly. I was no longer the invisible old woman clinging to a lamppost. I was the lady on the porch who brought people together. It still astonishes me at 74, when I thought life had already decided my fate. Here I was, writing a new chapter. A chapter where I wasn't a burden, but a contributor. Of course, not everything was easy. My body reminded me daily of its limits. Some mornings, my knees throbbed so fiercely that even standing was a battle. Once, during a netting session, my hand cramped badly, and I had to stop mid-stitch. The children looked at me with worry. For a moment, shame washed over me. I didn't want them to see me weak. But then one of the girls said, "It's okay, Mrs. Maggie. We'll do it for you." And they did, giggling as they tangled the yarn, proud to help their teacher. That's when I understood strength isn't about never showing weakness. It's about allowing others to stand with you when you can't stand alone. One Sunday, the pastor at church asked me to speak briefly about the knitting group. I nearly refused. I hadn't spoken in front of people in years. But Carol squeezed my hand and said, "Maggie, you've touched lives. Share it." So I stood before the congregation, knees trembling, heart racing.
My voice cracked at first, but then it steadied as I told them how loneliness had nearly swallowed me, how small act of kindness opened a door, and how the simple act of knitting had drawn people together. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then one by one, people began to clap. Some even stood. I couldn't believe it. For the first time in so long, I felt truly seen. Afterward, several women approached me. They wanted to join or donate yard or bring their children. One man said his mother was at home feeling lonely, and he asked if he could bring her to meet me. My porch was becoming more than a porch. It was becoming a community. As weeks turned into months, the circle grew. We began knitting hats and scarves for the homeless shelter downtown. The first time we delivered a box of handmade items, the look on the shelter director's face nearly brought me to tears. She said, "You don't know how much this means." And I thought, no, I do know, because it means everything to me too. That evening, I sat with my son on the phone. Usually, our conversations are brief, rushed between his meetings and family obligations. But that night, I told him about the knitting circle, the shelter donations, the way the children made me laugh. He was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, "Ma, I'm proud of you." Those 4 words broke me open. Tears led down my cheeks. It wasn't just pride I felt, it was relief. Relief that my children no longer needed to carry me as a burden, but could see me standing strong again. Even if my body is frail, my spirit is alive, and that's a gift I could still give them. Now, each day, I carry myself differently, not with arrogance, but with dignity. When I go to the store, I don't lower my eyes. If people rush past, so be it. I know I matter, even if they don't see me. When I sit on my porch, I don't just wait for the world to notice me. I extend my hand, I wave, I invite. And slowly, people respond. Robert used to tell me, "Maggie, you've got more strength than you realize." Back then, I brushed it off, but now I think he saw something in me I never saw in myself. Even in his absence, he was right. Sometimes at night, I still feel the weight of loneliness. I still miss his laughter, the way he'd hum while fixing something in the garage. But instead of letting that ache consume me, I let it guide me. I remind myself that love never dies. It simply changes form. Robert's love is in the cedar box he built, in the plant on the windowsill, in the courage that keeps me moving. And maybe, just maybe, it's in the porch filled with laughter too. As I sit here now, writing these thoughts in the quiet of evening, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Peace. Not the lonely, punishing silence of before, but a peace born of connection, of knowing I am part of something larger than myself. My life isn't perfect. My body is weak, but my spirit is stronger than ever. And if anyone were to ask me what I've learned in these twilight years, I would tell them this: you are never truly invisible unless you show up. The world may rush past, blind and distracted, but if you open your door, if you share even the smallest piece of yourself, you will be seen. I am Margaret. I am 74. I am a widow, a mother, a teacher, a friend. I am not done yet. And though my story is not grand, it is mine. And that, I have learned, is enough.